who's going to talk about how code and politics interact.
Thank you very much. Yes, the previous talk was on how, ended up with a discussion on how tech is democracy and democracy is determined by tech. So this is actually a talk on how code and politics and tech and politics interact. And you're welcome to tweet along the way. In 2000, this is sort of the overview of the speech as well. In 2000, a guy that I feel should actually have been one of the presidential candidates, called Lawrence Lessig, predicted that the code of cyberspace would change the cyberspace that we had at the time from a place that protects anonymity and free speech and individual control to a place that makes anonymity harder, speech less free, and stops individual to control the province of his own sort of sphere and data, making identification possible online, which it wasn't at the time. And that was said in the 1st of January 2000. And since then, we have had 9/11 and the war on terror, and things have only gotten worse since then. But I think it's quite interesting to see how these thoughts were already out there in 2000, and it seems like nothing really has changed. One of the points is that code regulates our world when the politicians don't. It's not only a question of having a law and putting that down, but the rules of the internet, the rules of our tech regulates our lives in many ways, in a much more invasive and all-encompassing manner than just a law would. It implements values. The way that we produce our code and our tech, if we aren't aware of the values that we're embedding into it, then we will be replicating the values that surround us and the people that are producing the code. We need to be aware of what the consequences are of the code that we're doing. If we can't have a diverse team behind the code that's being written, then at least let us open up the sphere of problems that we want the code to be dealing with. If we only code for people who look like ourselves, then it will be a very narrow scope of what the tech will be doing. You can use code to either protect privacy or promote monitoring. It depends on the way that we do the code. It is the people who chooses what code does. And therefore, we should be careful what we code for. How many of you delete your emails after you've read them? No hands are being shown. I guess you're a bit like me, having an email box that's large enough to encompass all of your emails from 10 years back or whenever you started having emails. And Gmail has been making this very easy for all of us, and it's spread to all of the other online email providers. We feel like the emails should be there, accessible at any point, so that we can go back and see what somebody wrote or some notification that we got at some point. Most of us are on Facebook or on Twitter, and a lot of us, at least I do, get notifications when people write something, so that if things are changed or deleted, you have some physical trace of it. But that means that all of these notifications come into all of our inboxes and are guarded in the cloud of the emails, and it might not be a lot of data for each one of them. But if you put them all together and you look at the amount of data that is being guarded and the amount of electricity that's being used to run the servers and the networks and the amount of natural resources that are being used to run these things, then you actually have some external, yeah, it's on the wall, it's difficult to say, consequences of the code and the tech that we write. It actually has effects for the people working in the mines, producing the rare earth minerals to produce the laptops and the servers and the tech that we need to actually have access to whoever mentioned you in a tweet 5 years ago within seconds. And we need to have a consciousness of the consequences of the environmental consequences of the choices that we make in the code. And we need to encode into the algorithms and the tech that we have the civic responsibility and an environmental responsibility. If we look at the advertisement that's being done online, I'm quite sure that a lot of you have come across advertisements where you think, okay, why on earth do they think that I am looking for baby gear, or I am a truck driver, or I'm living somewhere else, or why are they advertising hotels in the place that I've already been? Because the advertisements often get you wrong. They have, even if they are a lot better than they used to be, and Google and others are making a lot of money on targeting advertising to us, we have all experienced that they get it wrong. But what do we then do when we're using the same kind of code and the same faults in the code and analysis and the data sets to predict who goes to jail and who gets arrested, where the police stations should be placed? Because the code that is being used for these kind of predictive policing is not a lot better than the code that's being used for the advertisement. And if you look at predictive policing and look at the results that you get, you can see that there are a whole bunch of corporations that are looking into it, and a lot of politicians and local governments are trying to see if they could get the computer to figure it out for them so that they don't have to be aware of the policy consequences and the prejudice that they have, and also not have to be putting the money into having more people on the streets to actually think about it. Say, okay, if we can get the computer to think about it for us, then everything will be right, because the computer is always right. It's technical, it's neutral, so therefore, of course, we trust it. But if we go back to thinking about the advertisement, and that doesn't get it right, and then think about the fact that we actually have more control over what the advertisers are allowed to do with our data, and to us as consumers, then we have control over the code and the tech that our government agencies are using, and we have less insight in what the government agencies are using than we do in the big corporations, even though we feel that is too little. Tech used to be its own little isolated sector where we could say, okay, we regulate, perhaps we don't care so much about how our code is being written because it doesn't have that many consequences. But now we have what everybody loves to talk about. It's sort of the stable of BuzzFeed bullshit bingo is the Internet of Things. You are having everything online, and you are having the weaknesses of the code then being embedded in our everyday lives, and therefore we need to think even more about the moral responsibilities of the tech that we're producing and the true social and environmental costs of our technologies. And we need to produce better code for our technology. We need to actually go back to the time when we weren't just putting it out there and trying to see if it would work, and if it broke, then we might try and fix it. We need to have internal checks and audits before we go out and put it out there. And it's not just about opening the code up and allowing people to see what's written there and if it's nice and neat or if it's a big mess, which I believe a lot of, at least I've been told that a lot of code is. It's also about the thinking and the thought process that goes into the tech and the systems that we have. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate, or if I'm saying something that's completely stupid, don't hesitate to stop me along the way. So what is the web that we have these days? Sometimes you forget that the web that we see is tailored to the choices that we've made and the choices that others have made based on the way that we act online. And we've perhaps forgotten what it was like to be online just 6 years ago. But if you are put into jail and removed from the online world for about 6 years, then you can have a bit of a shock when you come out. And instead of me trying to explain all of this, I am going to try and play you a video by who was called the blog father of Iran, and allow him to explain it for you if I can get the tech to work. Should be video in here.
6 years is a long time to be absent from life, but it is an entire era online. This is the story of a man who spent 6 years in prison in Iran over his web activities, and when freed, found an entirely different internet. I am Hossein Darakhshan. I was freed from jail in November 2014. I used to have a popular blog called Editor Myself, and because of my serious efforts to promote blogs, they gave me the funny title of Blog Father here. Tehran has changed a lot during this time. Many old houses are replaced by high-rise luxurious condos. There are new roads, new highways, and many big SUVs. There are numerous large billboards with advertising for Swiss-made watches and Korean flat-screen TVs. And everybody seems more colorful and stylish, especially women. And hundreds of new cafes have opened up with Western music and female staff. This was all a huge surprise to me. The most shocking thing for me was how the internet had changed. I had heard about social networks' importance, and I knew that now everybody used them. What I didn't know was that they had not just killed blogging as I knew it, but also they had stolen most of our readers. Writing and publishing in social media was not much different from writing in a blog, but getting your posts read, or at least viewed by them, had become a big challenge. I started my blog, a new one, in Persian, about books and ideas. And I knew that I had to share it on social media, so I shared it on Facebook and Twitter. But in the first few days, it only received 4, 5, 6 likes. I started to think and reflect, and I used social networks to share my thoughts. Gradually, I realized that blogs are practically dead. And the reason for that was not the social networks per se. It was their treatment of hyperlinks and the philosophy behind their algorithms of representation, or what is now called the stream. Facebook's newsfeed is a stream. The idea is that not everyone's posts are interesting for you. So Facebook's algorithms pick the ones that are more recent, and they have already received some likes, and they're about topics that you've already shown an interest in. In other words, the stream equates importance with newness and popularity. This is exactly like the real world, where youth and fame, or better to say, young celebrities, have dominated our cultures. Sadly, the once utopian virtual world is finally catching up with the depressing rules of the real world. Meanwhile, social networks are obsessively trying to keep us inside. So they are not big fans of hyperlinks, which take their users outside. Some, like Instagram, are simply preventing hyperlinks. Others, like Facebook, are degrading the hyperlink. Facebook only allows one link in a post, which is separate from the text, not part of it. It then treats that link like an object rather than a relation between inside and outside. It strips the hyperlink of its diversifying and decentralizing power. The rise of the stream and the fall of hyperlinks. have resulted in a very different internet compared to 6 years ago. Web pages outside social networks are dying, and there are less and less people who are clicking on links in their newsfeed. They're also much less exposed to different opinion than before. Because of this tyranny of the popular, minority views are quashed and they are being radicalized as a result. The truth is that the internet is much less diverse now. Apart from deviating from the web's diverse nature, the internet is also becoming quite centralized with social networks. Now, huge amounts of user-generated content is kept within social networks' gigantic databases. We hardly own what we produce, and the risk of losing them is very high. Also, we are giving so much detail about our preferences that we have become extremely predictable to states and big corporations. And predictability means control. A recent study shows that Facebook can know you better than your parents with only 150 likes, and even better than your spouses with 300 likes. I think human race has never been so naked and so powerless. Blogs used to be the closest form to the vision of Tim Berners-Lee, who invented the World Wide Web. They provided a non-sequential, decentralized, active, and diverse way of representing information. With Facebook, blogs are dead. Now the internet is defined not by an interconnected collection of websites, but by a series of disconnected and centralized social networks and mobile apps that are gradually making web browsers irrelevant. The web started from academia. It involved lots of thinking, reading, and debating. It had an unprecedented intellectual power. But now the social networks are making it more of entertainment. This centralized, linear, programmed, and inward-looking medium is not the internet as we knew it. It is television. When we log on to Facebook, our personal television starts broadcasting.
So as to go, there'll be a link for the last bit of the video, but I think we need to move on a bit. The stream, as Roseanne described, is part of the sort of ad-based economy. And as the internet is being more and more influenced by advertisement and social media, it also is not just an ad-based economy that we all know, but also an attention-based economy. The apps of the social media that we use are based on the fact that they want to keep us there for as long as possible. So they will set up notifications about things that happen. They will skewer the facts of how many people have commented, or they will re-notify you about things going on your page 5 times so that you go in there, and they will rebroadcast things that happened 3 hours ago to you again so that you will keep staying in their sphere so that they can find out what you do and sell the information about you to the advertisers. The last bit might have been a bit sort of déjà vu for a lot of you, but I think it's important to realize that things have changed, and the way that we in this room use the internet is not the way that other people necessarily view and use the internet. I don't think we can underestimate the amount of people who don't understand that Facebook is not the internet, and that searching for something in Google is not the internet either. And we really need to be aware of the way that other people use the internet. And the first bit of my speech was about how code is politics. And now I'm a wannabe politician, and I want to understand how politics is also determined by code and the way that we use and have the web today. This is an image on filter bubbles. In 2011, a guy called Eli Fisher wrote about filter bubbles and described how the algorithms of the websites that we use, they tailor the content that we see on the web according to who we are and what our interests are, what our friends are, the 150 likes that we have on Facebook that allows Facebook to define us. And that changes the way that we see the world. We only see the things that they would predict that interests us the most. And this has also been referred to as mobocratic algorithms, where you have a polarization of viewpoints, and you only see the things that you agree with. You have rumors that run amok across the internet and are highly difficult to quash and disprove. We have created our own echo chambers because if you're a public person, and especially if you're a woman, like Emma Halton just described in the previous talk, you need to simply block and unfollow people that are harassing you online. But it's also, as a regular citizen online, you often unfollow people that say things that you get tired of, even if the algorithms don't do it for you. And you have online platforms that favor people broadcasting something rather than entering into conversations. You have posts rather than discussions, and you have a situation where we talk at each other rather than with each other. You have this valley of open-mindedness where you have either you get shown the stuff that gets lots of likes, it's the people that agree with you, or it's the people that you definitely don't agree with. So if, for me, example, if Martin Henriksen from Dansk Folkeparti has said something outrageous, then a lot of the people that I surround myself with online would then say, oh, have you seen this? And this is terrible. Or Henrik D. Poulsen, the blogger at Berlingske, this is outrageous. How can they say these things? And so you have the two sides. You have all of the people that you agree with, isn't this fantastic what Senior Stamper just said, and that's really made a great point, or it's what Martin Henriksen said that we don't agree with. But you don't have a lot of the meeting of conversations with people that you don't agree with 100% and you don't disagree with 100%, but you might actually find a compromise and you might actually learn something from each other. And because of the social media platforms that we use to broadcast our thoughts online, the more sensational we write stuff, the more pointed, the more outrageous, sensational it is, the more likes and reach we'll get. So you also have a circle where we are prompted into writing stuff that the platforms like and that will be shared, because that's the way that we can get our voice heard. As a politician, you don't want to be anonymous. You actually want people to hear what you say. And if the only way of getting heard is by being sensational and simplified, then that's what the politicians will do, because that's what gets their voice out there, and that's what makes people know what their name is and be able to put that cross on the voting ballot next to it. And I really believe that that has led to a large amount of polarization in politics, because we see either things that we hate or people that we really love. So wouldn't it be much better if we just only read newspapers rather than be online and use the social media? The problem is, unless you have a paper newspaper, then we see the newspapers through their websites. And they are determined by the same way, the same algorithms as the social media platforms, because most of the information, most of the people that go through to the newspapers, they get it through the social media. So not even going on to traditional media will actually save us. And I believe that one of the reasons why we see a politician such as Trump flourishing and being a presidential candidate in the US is because The journalists can sit and see how many people read their article about something outrageous that Trump said yesterday and see that 500,000 read that yesterday, but their balanced viewpoint about why Ted Cruz views are radical Christianity, they only got like 20,000. So they will be victims to the same mechanisms as politicians on social media are, of trying to write something sensational that will get them noticed. And they will be encouraged both by their sort of ego of wanting people to read them, but also by their editors that want more clicks so that they can get to sell more ads and earn more money. So how do we actually make sure that we get the facts out there? And that's actually a really big problem, because who gives a fuck about facts? What you want is reach. You have a publisher like Den Korte Avis, who's actually getting public funding in Denmark, who is #1 on Facebook. That's the one that gets the reach, and they don't really care that much about facts or balance. So how can we change this in the future? How can we make this a better place? A lot of us had hope that the internet will save democracy, will change things, will break down barriers, do away with the gatekeepers. But the tech that we have, the algorithms behind the social media platforms have not been putting focus on quality. It's been putting focus on how many people have seen it, how many clicks does it get, not if you've changed their mind or if they're able to actually change politics. So the question is, can we actually change this? Can we make different platforms? Can we make incentives for people to engage with each other rather than talking at each other? Can we somehow reward getting people to change their minds rather than punishing it? Because as it is now, somebody will come up with a screenshot saying, but you now have a different opinion today than what you had 3 years ago or 2 weeks ago. So therefore, you have a mechanism where it gets you to form an opinion that's simplistic, radical, and then you're not allowed to change it afterwards. And that's not very good for reaching political solutions that help us all. In 2011, there was the Egyptian revolution as part of the Arab revolutions that swept across North Africa and the Middle East. And this guy was working for Google in Dubai, and he was hopeful in 2011, and he was part of the Facebook page that created the movement that brought down Mubarak and created the mass demonstrations on Tahrir Square. He said in 2011, if you want to liberate a society, all you need is the internet. Then 2013 came. You'd had the first democratic elections in Egypt. You'd had President Morsi, who was elected for the Muslim Brotherhood, the first democratically elected president in Egypt in decades. And then you had the military going in and removing him, and you had people on the streets again. And the next picture is a bit graphic, and people died. People were killed by the military, and you now have the military back in power, and you don't have democracy in Egypt anymore. We had popular uprising helped by the tools of the internet, but the tools of the internet don't help us create traditional political organizations. There is a great talk online about from a technology socialist called Zainab, which explains how you don't just need the tech, you also need the physical meetings. And a lot of the power of the political movements of the past was that the logistics that was needed, that we no longer need because of the tech, brought people together and forced them to reach compromises. And Walid Momen is now saying that if we want to liberate society, we first need to liberate the internet. We need to go back to, or we need to create an internet where we have dialogue and conversation and not just talking at each other. questions? Comments? Did I say that was wrong? First of all, making people aware of the fact of what's going on. I also greatly believe that we need to politically legislate against the monopolies that are being created online. Facebook is actively trying to be the only place you go online because that's the way that they can control all of what you're doing and seeing. So we need to have some kind of legislation that stops this movement towards monopolies. And then we need to go back to being on the real open web and actually writing blogs, taking the information outside of the social media. And the problem is that it's addictively easy to just post something on Facebook and follow the rules that they've written. I think that we should all have our own websites. We should all have places where we have control over the content, because what we post on social media is not ours. It's something that they then own and can do with what they like. Just like when you buy music on iTunes, you don't actually own the music. You just own the right to listen to it until they decide otherwise. So you need to get people de-addicted from the social media that control, that sort of have this mob mentality, and then also try and see if we can use other forms. Why did he try to? He set up a platform promoting more discussion that was then bought by Quora, where you can post questions and get replies and have a more balanced kind of discussion, and perhaps try and use more of these. So it's not easy. So the problem is that Danmarks Radio are placing the stuff on Facebook and their website is so crap you can't actually find anything. And you're forced to pay for it. I think that public service media are really important, because that's some of the... You control it politically and you have something that's national, and it's not just diversified and fractioned as sort of private and unregulated media are. But I think we need to be more aware of the fact that Facebook isn't neutral and it isn't the internet. And we need to make sure that the public media and also municipalities and our politicians and Folketinget, that they also break away from the sort of walled gardens of social media and go out into the public web. Because so many people have things that only go on Facebook, and that that's the only way that's the only place that it's published. And the problem is that it's really, really difficult to get people away from it, also because they don't understand how things work if it's not Facebook. And it's a great political and educational task of trying to get people to understand what they're doing and how to access things. Yeah, you.
You said that Facebook organizes their
depends on how you do it, I think. If you build into it that you get shown what has the most likes or the most comments first, then you will just replicate what happens on Facebook. But if you can somehow figure out a way of getting people to get some more healthy information rather than junk food information, then that might work. But the problem is, just like junk food is addictive, junk food information that pleases you immediately is also addictive. You like being confirmed, you like having people you agree with, and sort of outrage is also really powerful. So it's difficult to... You need to be really careful to not just find the sort of easy calories and appeal of the way that social media work at the moment, the way that Facebook works, and use that to make the open web more appealing, because then you will just have the problem in a different sphere. There's a question right in front of you as well. Yep. No, I see your point. The only problem is if we have politics that's dominated by the way that social media works, where you have... Because you can have a website that will get more people viewing it because you have more people online, and you could have a specialized website on the clan system in Somalia, and you would have had 2 people in Denmark who would be interested in that 10 years ago, and now people in Somalia and Kenya and London would have access to that website, and you could have a real factual, interesting discussion about it. But that's not gonna change who decides in the country that you live in. What decides who gets elected is how many people that they can mobilize. And if you're just writing for the few, you're not going to mobilize the masses and get them to go down and vote. And therefore you will have this polarized situation where you have one part of the country not understanding how the other part of the country could vote for those idiots, and the other part of the country thinking, oh, well, that's perfectly reasonable. Why did all of those idiots vote for the other idiots? And none of them saw it coming. And you had it after the elections last year. It's like, oh, how did Danish People's Party in Denmark become so big? We didn't see that. No, because you only see what you and your friends like. And that goes for journalists as well. We're inside our little bubbles, and therefore we've stopped being able to understand what's going on in our society.
Are you seeing any
I see some trends in trying to deal with the monopolies and also trying to ensure data portability, moving from one platform to the next. But getting them to open up their code, I think we need a lot more people who know about it to get active in politics and not just believe that politicians are idiots, because otherwise it will just be the idiots who gets to decide, and therefore they don't see the problems that are deciding what happens. It's also difficult because you would have to find a way of going into the business model of a company and saying, okay, you need to open this up to others. But when you have something that is dominating our society as much as Facebook and Google, and you need to do something about it, and you need to make sure that you still have some kind of, you need to reintroduce some kind of gatekeeper that's not just a public company. You need to have some kind of control over it, that you can see what is. Before, you could go down and you can buy the Social Democratic newspaper, or you could buy the conservative one, and you would know how the paper was edited and what kind of viewpoints were behind it. But it's really difficult for you to understand what the views are and what the rationale is between for the Facebook stream and the edits of that you see on your phone. So I didn't really have any easy answers to all of your questions, but I think that also shows how challenging and difficult it is, because it's not about, there are no easy solutions. It's not just about, okay, we turn this switch a little, or we change this a little. It's not just about changing the tech by itself. It's also about changing the way that people use information and how they act. It's about psychology rather than just technology. And we need to look at the way that we live and the way that we interact, and try and change the world for the better. Try and change the tech for the better, and try and change the politics for the better. And it's a lot of small steps, but hopefully by being aware of there being a problem, it's the first step to finding a solution. Thank you very much.